All right. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Vince Long, president of the Dell Home Service League. And I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're glad that you're here. I see a lot of familiar names in the list, a lot of unfamiliar names. So we're glad wherever you are for joining us. If you're not familiar with the Dell Home Service League, we're the ceramics affiliate of the Mint Museum, with the mission of promoting ceramics through programs, exhibitions, and publications in partnership with the Mint and potters across North Carolina. I'm going to place some links in the chat as we go along where you can click to get additional information or take note if you want to have some information. That includes a site where you can join us as a new member of the Dell Home and support our activities that way. We hope you would consider that. Or if you'd like to support the work that we're doing, a place where you can donate. All donations are welcome. Our next program coming up is on March 15th at 10 a.m. when we're going to hear from Steve Compton, who is a noted historian and author. He's written a number of books on North Carolina pottery, and we hope you'll join us then. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to our distinguished speakers, Amy Sanders and Ron Philbeck. We reached out to them and said, asked if they would do this program and said, let's structure it pretty much just as an informal discussion, what it would be like if we all happened to be able to get out in the world and go drop in and visit with them in their studios and hear about the work that they're doing. So they're going to share some of that information with us. And while I think both Amy and Ron are good friends of the Dell Home, they both are scheduled to be potters in this year's Potters Market at the Mint. That will be Amy's 5th time, I believe, and Ron's 2nd time at Potters Market. But rather than me try to do a lot of background, I'm going to just ask them to introduce themselves and we'll take it from there.
All right. Thanks you guys so much for just taking the time out today. I know it's beautiful outside, so I appreciate that y'all are taking the time to be online with us. Ron and I are going to take a little moment to introduce ourselves and then talk about our work, but our main focus today is to talk about our collaboration that we've started in the past year. So quickly, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Amy Sanders, and I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been a studio artist since, 2004. I enjoy teaching workshops. I teach classes at Clayworks Studio here in Charlotte, and I have my own studio in the backyard, which is pretty awesome. Recently, because of the pandemic, I have 2 children. I've got 2 boys, Guthrie and Sammy. They're in 5th and 7th grade, and they're doing remote school. So I've been working out of the kitchen just to be more present with them. But I am still able to be relatively productive, which is nice. I make highly patterned and textured work, mostly functional wear, and I work in red earthenware and fire to cone 03 in electric kilns. I do low fire and use terra sigillata and glazes. In just a little bit, I'll talk more about my work specifically, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. So Ron can go ahead.
Cool, thanks, Amy. Yeah, you guys, thanks for being here. This is fun. This is sort of the first thing like this I've done, so it's pretty cool, and I think hopefully it'll work out well. So anyway, my name's Ron Philbeck. I know a lot of you guys, and I live in Shelby, North Carolina, which is about 50 miles west of Charlotte, on the North Carolina, South Carolina border. And so we're about an hour away from Charlotte, about an hour and a half from Asheville, about an hour from Greenville, South Carolina. So I started making pots when I came home from college in 1992. And I went I quit all my other jobs in 1997 and went full time. And I've been a full-time potter since then, just making pots and selling out of my studio and doing craft shows and sending work off to shops and galleries and stuff. And so it's been a pretty cool journey for me. You know, I studied mathematics in college. I wasn't an art major, but I always wanted to go to art school, but I wasn't really encouraged to do that. So So things have worked out pretty good. And I knew what kind of pots I liked pretty much right off the bat. I saw these really lightly salted stoneware pots from this couple up in near Bakersville, North Carolina, called Rock Creek Pottery. And when I saw those pots, I just knew that that's sort of the type of work I wanted to make. And so in right around 97, I built my salt kiln, and I've been doing that kind of work for just about that whole period of time. I did take a little earthenware holiday for about 8 years. It was only going to be for a winter, but it lasted quite a bit longer. But I love the surface of salt and soda fired work, and so that's really what keeps me going. So I think we're going to I'll go ahead and kind of segue into just talking a little bit about my specifics of my work, and then we'll kind of flip back over to Amy, right, Amy, and get some more specifics about her work. So I'm going to just show you guys some examples of the work I'm making now. And excuse me while I reach to get a few different things here. So mainly talking about this salt and soda firing. What I love about this is that there's a lot of variation on the surface. So for many, many years, I made sort of real straightforward functional work that was not decorated. It was stoneware clay with a slip, either a yellow slip or an orange slip or a white slip or a blue slip, and maybe some real simple decoration, because I never felt like I was really good with a brush like my heroes at Rock Creek Pottery were. They were like super good at that kind of thing. So my work has sort of changed over the years. I've tried lots of different things, but it's always sort of been about functional pots and about surface. So this is just an example of a titanium slip on stoneware clay. And then this is sort of my orangey slip on a different stoneware. This is a body from North Carolina clays. And so I love all this variation in surface. And over the years, I've experimented with different kinds of decoration. And when I did my earthenware period, I was doing some sgraffito, and I've always loved journaling and drawing, and drawing animals. And a lot of my heroes in the pottery world, have these decorated pots with people or animals or, flowers or leaves or grass, but I was never really good at that. So sgraffito really worked for me because it was like pen and ink. It was like a hard point on a hard pot. So like on a paper. So I came up with some imagery pretty much straight out of my sketchbook, but, I have a lot of influences as far as, illustrators and people whose work I look at for stuff like that. I love old Japanese woodblock cuts. And there's some English illustrators I love, and just tons of people that I can't think of right now, right off the bat. But anyway, and then a few years ago, I started using wax resist to wax out the negative space. I'm going to show you a little example of this in just a bit. To wax out the negative space, so I draw on the pot with a pencil because I'm really feel comfortable with a pencil. So I do the drawing with the pencil on the bisque pot, and then I wax out all this negative space. And so I can get a nice sharp outline that's kind of like a woodcut. And then I put in some black underglaze or stain to get this black line. And then this color is from a slip. And then it's fired in the soda kiln. And what happens, the sodium vapor that I spray into the kiln, that vaporizes and glazes the pots. So I get lots of variety in surface. And now I'm really excited about being able to do this decoration, because I think it suits me, and it sort of brought everything together for me. It brought my sort of hard line, and it brought in sort of the animals and things I like to draw. And it brought in my salt and soda fired pots. And so everything just in the last couple of years has really come together. I've known about this wax resist technique from my earliest days in pottery because I saw Michael Simon from Athens, Georgia do this exact thing. But it's taken me 20 something years
Hey, Ron,
to do it. Yeah.
for the piece that you're showing us right now, it's really
Uh-huh.
interesting how you've got this yellowish glaze or tint on the right-hand side and a more orangey color elsewhere. Can you talk about what caused that?
Right. So this is the background slip on this pot is all one thing. It's all one color. It's all one slip, right? And then it sits in the kiln, you know, flat on the shelf like this, and the flame and the salt or the soda vapor will move across the pot like this. And there may have even been another pot sitting here to provide maybe something that caused the flame to move around. So the atmosphere was probably a little more oxidized here, and this was probably a little more reduced. So really kiln placement has a lot to do with the variations in surface color and texture. If they get a lot of soda, then you get this classic sort of orange peel texture, which you may know from salt glazed work, and you get that from soda firing as well. And
Yeah, it might help. I think a lot of people have always heard about salt fired, and they haven't heard about soda fired as much. Can you kind of maybe explain the difference or differentiate between the two techniques?
Sure. Yep. So, you know, a lot of folks have heard of salt glazing, and that goes way, way, way back. You know, that's very way back in historical German pots, and you know, pretty far back. And what happens with salt glaze is you fire the kiln up to temperature around 2,300 degrees, and then you put salt into the kiln, just regular table salt or just some form of salt. And that salt, the heat, you know, vaporizes the salt, and that sodium vapor moves through the kiln and combines with the silica in the clay or the glaze or the slip to glaze the pot. And so the more of that sodium that lands on the pot, the more of a sheen or this orange peel texture that you'll get. The difference between salt and soda is that soda, and when I say soda, the product that I'm putting into the kiln instead of salt is soda ash. But you can also use sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. And with soda, the distribution of the vapor is much less encompassing in the kiln. It's way more directional. With salt, it just goes in and really gets everywhere. Soda, it's harder for that substance to break down. So the way that folks have sort of started using soda is and this is what I do, is dissolve it in hot water, and then I put it in a garden sprayer, and then I spray a fine mist of that soda and water mixture into the kiln at top temperature, and that takes about 2 hours. And I put about 2 pounds of soda ash in that 2 gallons of water into the kiln. And so that directional flow through the kiln is what really gives you all this variation in the surface. Like there would have been another pot sitting pretty close to this bottle right here. And so you see you've got this shadow where it was protected, and then the sodium vapor moved across here. And so you get this nice blush. And then this is really reduced, and maybe some carbon trapping. So it's kiln atmosphere, it's the type of slip you put on the pot, it's the type of clay you have. So there's lots of variables that go into that. And that's really exciting to me. So
Thanks.
Yeah.
We do have another question. Judy asked, do you paint anything other than wax on the decoration?
No, well, you'll see that more, Judy, that'll become a little more clear in a few minutes. I'm going to do let me grab this. I'm I'm going to finish this pot here in just a few minutes, but this is just a bisque fired plate. And then I've drawn this image on with pencil because I'm good with that. And then this red splotchy, messy bit is all the wax that I brushed on in this negative space. And then in a few minutes, I'm going to put on this black slip, and it'll show up this image, which when it's fired, the wax melts away, the black and the background slip and the rest of the pot gets glazed by the sodium in the kiln. And then when the kiln cools, everything comes out. And so my kiln holds about 150 pots. And so it takes me about a month to do a kiln cycle. And a lot of that is sitting down and decorating 150 pots to go into the kiln. So yeah, that's sort of my process. And I fired my kiln yesterday. So it's cooling right now, which is always exciting. So that's sort of my process in a nutshell, and a little bit about my background. So cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Ron. Ron makes awesome pots. We have probably the most pots in our house of one potter are Ron pots in our house.
Oh, thanks.
Here's a lovely tea bowl that I'm drinking. All right, I can be like fangirl.
I'll send you your $20 later.
Thanks. Yeah, I expect that. All right, so I was going to talk a little bit about my work. So I make decorative work that is also functional. And when I first moved here to Charlotte in 1999, my husband and I moved down here actually to do AmeriCorps with Habitat for Humanity. So I was a full-time volunteer and I didn't have a place to work. So as a creative outlet, I started to do some sewing. So I was sewing some quilts and some other kind of decorative type stuff. And so once I found a studio about a year later, I found that sewing really influenced my work. So I really love the idea of, clay is very soft and pliable when it's wet. And I love that idea of like kind of capturing that softness and almost in piecing parts together, almost like sewing. So a lot of my work kind of reflects that, that idea of, how the process of how a pot was made, kind of leaving seams showing, capturing the fact that, that pliability and softness of the clay, but yet after it's fired, it's very hard, but, things making it almost look like you could squish them once it's fired. And also the idea of just being influenced by patterns and fabrics and like vintage fabrics and the idea of repetition. So one of the things that's become very important in my work is the idea of tool making and having kind of a vocabulary of mark making that I use in my work. So I use a lot of stamps. So here's some examples of some stamps I've made. This is just bisque fired clay. And so I have over probably 200 or 300 stamps in my whole collection, and I'll rotate them on a pretty regular basis. But I often have like favorites that I like to use. So I've got different styles. So these are stamps I just press in the clay. Here's an example. So this is one stamp, and here's an example of it being used on a piece. It's a little vase form, but it, being pressed into the clay, the idea that you could rotate it or leave more or less space in between the stamps really interests me. I love the idea of thinking about the negative space between the stamps. And I'm kind of a more is more gal. So after a time, I found that I like the idea of having the mark making on both the inside and the outside of the pots. So I started to transition into creating my own molds out of clay as well. So I have this, you can see, I'll rotate the computer a little bit. I've got this whole host of bisque molds that I've made in my studio. And that allows me to have those marks on both the inside and the outside of pots. So for instance, this is a bisque mold. This is just bisque fired clay. And so I use those stamps that I make and stamp it into the clay, let that dry, and then fire this. And then I can use this as a baseline for a pot. So I've got a pot here that I've made from this mold here. So you can see then when I use these molds, the cool thing about it is I've got the marks that come out as well as marks that go inside. So I can have like an interplay of that mark making. And I like the idea of I can kind of quote myself essentially by having marks similar on both the inside and the outside of the pot. And that way I can have those marks on both surfaces. So I worked for quite some time with stoneware. I fired kind of mid-range stoneware for a while until I think like 2013. Then I switched to using earthenware, and that's a low fire surface. I really love the richness of the red clay. And the way I finish my pots is I use a material called terra sigillata, which is Italian for sealed earth. And essentially what that is just clay, water, and a sodium silicate, which is a deflocculant. And then I add different colorants to that surface. And that way I brush it on while the clay is bone dry, so before it's been fired. And then I burnish it. And so it gives this nice buttery surface, and where it's thinner, it allows that red clay to show through. So it gives me a nice, really depth of surface on my clay. And then I can use a collection of different kinds of clear glazes on top. So this is a really great example of using some of the different clears. So this is just the terra sigillata surface. It's nice and yummy and buttery. This is a shiny clear. And then this is a satin matte clear. So that way I can have that sheen change, and it actually has a little different color shift. And this is another example of that. Once again, this is all the same terra sigillata color, but this is that satiny matte color, which gives me more of a cobalty blue. It's kind of hard to tell with the lighting in here. Then I've got a shiny navy bluish color, and then this is just the terra sigillata as well. So I love that you can get this nice sheen and color shift happening with just a different kind of clears that I use on that surface. I saw somebody asked about if I burnish over the texture. Yes, I do. So I'll make a kiln load worth of pots. They'll be bone dry, and I brush on all my terra sigillatas. I do like 1.5 to 2 coats. And then I just take a kind of a cheap microfiber towel and just rub it on the surface. And that has a sheen kind of comes up to the surface. So it's not like shiny necessarily, but it's a nice buttery, soft surface. As a result, I can grab right here. Conveniently, I'm also glazing right now. So, this is actually just a bisque fired piece, but you can see how, what the change that happens once it's fired. So this is the same color. This would be the same color as this just before it's been fired. So the way I finish these, I'll brush them with a wash. That's what I call patina wash, but it's just like a black, real watery substance. So I brush it on and then wipe it off, and that highlights all the stamped textures that I have. And then where I want the clear to be, or I want it to be shiny, or that satin matte clear, I'll brush that on the surface and then fire, and then have that as a finished piece. So I've been working with this for quite some time. And then relatively recently, I thought it would be fun. I had taken a workshop with Susan Fagan she's up at Pinland, and she does slip transfer on her pots. And I really love that idea of just kind of the same thing of mark making and repetition and creating tools once again to be able to repeat marks. So she taught us how to create screens, to do screen printing with a really simple material called Easy Screen. So it's like a pre-emulsioned screen paper that you expose to in the sunlight, and then you can have an actual screen for screen printing. And so I thought it would be fun to take some of the ideas I have with my stamps and actually use some of this imagery, a lot of the floral references and things like that, and kind of blow those up to be slightly larger to create screens that I could then print with underglaze and then use that to transfer onto the clay. So then that kind of went into doing some screen printed surfaces that also had some of my stamping. So coming up with a way to kind of have this graphic mark making that's kind of referencing some of the marks I was making before with my stamps, but kind of in a larger scale, and being printed on the surface of the clay. So I really love that idea. So I started experimenting with that and doing some of these marks on the clay. And then the whole idea of, kind of having this screen printed mark, and this is smooth and shiny, and then having almost like the same kind of mark of a different scale stamped in the surface with my terra sigillata surface. So I really like that interplay of mark making and texture. and I was doing some hand built work as well as doing it on some thrown work. So here's a jar that has, kind of a combination of the stamping and the printmaking on it. So this has kind of been a fun aside project. So I feel like it's still in the similar vein of the work I make, but I kind of tend to work in cycles where this is a very different process than working with stamps and the textures. So a lot of times I'll make a run of pots with just the stamped work, and then I'll decide to make pots with the printed work. Because I feel like I have to kind of shift gears. Like in my brain, it takes a different brain processing sometimes for me to think about like creating a printed surface with the stamped surface. So I really like the idea of kind of working in groupings when I do that. So just kind of to show a little bit about the printmaking. So this is an example of one of the screens. So I could take this, put this down on newsprint paper, and then I screen through underglaze on that surface, and that results in a sheet. This is not the same sheet, but here's like a sheet of the printed paper, and then I can cut out what I want to use. Then I brush slip on that surface, and then I put that onto the clay. So it's a really fun process. So oftentimes the way I work with that, here's another example. I'll print certain imagery over and over and over again. Then I have this is my box. This is my collection of all these prints. So then I can cut them out. And the way, there's a lot of different ways that people do slip transfer. There's so many different ways that you can do it. But for me, the way my brain works and the way I enjoy doing it is I like the idea of almost thinking about it like collaging on clay. So a lot of times I'll kind of, let's say I'm doing a plate, I'll draw a circle on a piece of paper and then lay out my little pieces that I want to essentially collage onto there, decide which color combination I want to use, and then apply them to the plate. So I'll do it kind of piecemeal instead of creating one big paper that I then transfer onto the plate. So I know that's kind of a quickie explanation of it. But to me, it's a very similar process of like designing a surface when I'm making my molds, like laying out where do I want the stamping, where do I want the patterning, how am I breaking up the space? Am I doing kind of an all over pattern making, or am I kind of doing a band of marks and things like that? So I really enjoy the idea of the printmaking in a different way on the surface. So to kind of segue to Ron and I working together, why don't you put him back on there, Vince, if you could.
Yep.
Last, all kinds of stuff changed, I think, for everybody with the whole pandemic thing. And Ron and I have been really, really good friends for quite some time. And I know that, just in passing, we've probably considered collaborating maybe, but it's always like, oh, we should do this, and then never, And so I think early on in the pandemic, Ron and I were trying to remember if we were having lunch together outside or talking on the phone, I don't know, but he suggested, maybe we should do some collaborative pieces. And I was like, well, yeah, because things were kind of, I think I had some space in my schedule open up just by things being canceled and different shows and stuff like that not happening. So the first couple things we did, we started out, I think I mailed you 4 plates, didn't I, Ron? So it was right before. We're part of a group called Thrown Together, and we have a spring and a fall sale every year. And so I think I had mailed Ron 4 plates for the spring sale.
Yep.
And I had done stamping on 2 of them and the printmaking on 2 of them. And when we put them up for sale, they went immediately. And so like, maybe we hit on a little something. And I think both of us really enjoyed the idea of working together as well. So we kind of like, okay, let's be a little bit more intentional about this. And like so I ended up making, what was it, like 50 plates or something like that. It was a lot.
It was a lot.
I know, I'm sure Ron's like, oh my gosh. But so then we ended up kind of having this partnership, which has been, I found it to be remarkably fulfilling in these times. I think, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I know both of us were being really cautious about things and just, not having many interactions with people. So, for me at least, the idea of working on this was with Ron, even though we weren't necessarily together doing it, like I really, really enjoyed the process of thinking about, okay, like I'm making these, but knowing that my friend is also going to be working on these as well. And just kind of planning like, okay, if I design it this way, what might Ron do with this? And it was really fun to imagine, like, how is he going to react to this surface? And it's a different way of working too. I mean, like the colors are different from what Ron was doing. You know, for me, kind of coming up with like the composition of the surfaces, but leaving space for what his mark making would be on there was just a really interesting problem to solve. At least for me personally. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Ron.
Yeah, for me, it was, I mean, when I said, let's collaborate, I knew that it would go well. I knew that we could work well together because we can communicate, we're good at that. But it was really different for me to get these pots from Amy that had, color on them, because I have always kind of been intimidated by color. I tried my hand at painting, on canvas for a while, and I tried painting slip-on pots years ago. And, I'm the kid that, has like the 8-pack of crayons. I've got like red, blue, green, yellow, orange, and white and black, And so I have like limited like vision, in my mind. And so, I get Amy's pots and everything is like coordinate, it's just great, And so the other challenge was basically Amy was, like she said, putting these patterns on the pot, either texture or slip transfer. And I think, she was thinking, well, what would be the next step, or what would Ron do? And then I think and so I would get them, and some of them were really obvious to me to kind of, because I don't think quite as in a complex way, I don't think as Amy does, as far as pattern and color. I mean, we just have different creative minds or whatever. But so when I got this plate from Amy, it was just these two patterns and this orange, so this was pretty easy for me. I had a lot of space up here that I could have done different things with. But then I would get a few, out of that 50, there were probably like 15, and they were like, kind of had like a lot, it was just, I was like, oh my God, this thing's divided into thirds. What do I do with that, or like the imagery that I had been using on my work, the rabbits or the fish or whatever. I couldn't quite figure out how to do that on whatever Amy had set up. So, so over time, after, I guess we've done this 3 or 4 times now. And over time, my sort of creative problem solving has developed. And, so now I will like layer like something behind an image, or it'll kind of be coming around it, or sometimes if I can't figure anything out, I'll just make up like an animal, like it's like like I made up this robot, I made up like a weird fish with legs, like because you can do whatever you want to, right? It's kind of like, oh, I'll just draw this ball with eyeballs and wings on it, and there you go, stick it in there. So that's really cool for me, because I'm a little in my box. I'm really,
you definitely expanded some of the mark making that you were doing, and some of the characters. Your cast of characters broadened, which was really fun to see.
Yeah, it was cool, because like I would get some pots from Amy, and I would come up with something new, and then that would be something I would put on my next batch of work that went in my kiln. So it was like the two things were feeding, me. I was getting a lot of interplay out of it, and then I'd go to my journal and do all that. And so, yeah. Oh, and also Amy's like whipping out her pieces of paper and saying, and this is pretty easy and blah, blah, blah. Well, she came over here and taught me how to do that, right? Because I wanted to know how to do this. there's a learning curve, just like with anything. But let me tell you, folks, it
He is
was
so good. You're not giving yourself credit.
no, it was pretty, it was fun, but you have to think in reverse. You have to think in that front to back. Is that right, or back to
Yeah,
front?
yeah,
Front to back.
yeah. You kind of,
When
yeah.
I'm sure you'll show that when you show
Yeah.
your transfer. And anyway, and I just kept dropping stuff on the floor, and it would, it's like you put jam on a piece of toast, and you sit up there, and then you knock it off, and then it lands with the jam, So I just had, and then I'd stick my finger in it. Anyway, it was exciting. It was fun. I felt like I was in a whole nother world with that stuff. It was really cool.
We've got some good questions in there, but I'm wondering if it might be good to look at the images as
Yeah, yeah.
before we
Why don't
talk
Oh yeah,
about
let's
it,
do that.
to help
Okay.
everybody understand what we're.
Great.
This
Okay.
was the stack of plates that I made that poor sweet Ron.
Yeah.
had
So
to
yeah,
decorate.
right. So see, you guys, you can see that there's none of my imagery on here. And I did ask Amy, I said, do you want me to just do the black? Because I thought maybe I would do some color on there, but thank goodness she didn't say, yeah, try some. Oh my God, I would have
No,
just,
I think the black worked well with this.
that worked great. That was
Yeah.
a good decision. But
And
you
I
can
think-
see, yeah, you can see on some of these, like that tallest plate on the left there with the zigzags. That was one that challenged me to think, what could I put on that, because I don't want to cover all of Amy's work up. I want it to work together, and so it was definitely fun getting all these plates, and I would just grab my pencil and start drawing on them, and then I've also got a big eraser too, so it's cool because I can just erase if I don't like something.
Well, and it was good feedback for me to get from Ron too, to leave a little bit more space. I think the first batch of plates I did maybe didn't have as much space for him. I think I was thinking, oh, he can just go over some of this stuff, but I think he was hesitant to do that. So it was good feedback for me to hear from Ron that, maybe leaving a little more blank space for his marks was a little bit better and worked out better for the way his brain was working for the composition too. So it was a nice interplay of that design. So
Yeah,
this is one of my favorites. I love this guy.
yeah, and this octopus kind of showed up first on our work, and then I started using it some in my work. But I thought this was a good example of where I took some of the tentacles behind the circles, and then you've got that cool polka dot pattern in the background that everything is in front of. Yeah. So
it's fun revisiting some of these guys.
yeah, it's fun. I haven't seen some of these in a while, and when I get them, sometimes I don't see the color quite as clearly in my mind, and so after they're fired, you really get to see the color, and they really come to life.
Yeah.
So
they definitely become more vibrant once it's got the clear glaze on top.
Yeah, and I like the energy, sort of the interplay of the energy with my kind of sporadic-y kind of edges, and then a lot of times Amy's work is, or just that process, is nice and fluid and sort of curved and round. Yeah, that tyrannosaur, that dinosaur and the pterodactyl, that was, who knew? That's totally out of my 8-year-old self, And but it was funny because the person who bought that plate said that she loved that pterodactyl because she used to go to the pterodactyl club in Charlotte when she was in her 20s. And I went to the pterodactyl club quite a bit when I was in my 20s too, but that did not even occur to me when I drew that pterodactyl on there. So she and I were probably there at the same time.
I like this one. I like that sawfish.
Yeah.
The zigzaggy nose.
Yeah, here's the robot. I think this was the first robot. And like you got that flower there. And this is when Amy came to my studio and showed me how to do the transfer work, and I had thrown some pots. Up until this point, Amy had made all the pots. And in this group of pots, I made some cups and some unomis and that jar and a few plates. And then Amy made a lot of noodle bowls and some more plates and some of her slab plates and things. And it was a great load of work. It was
Yeah.
really cool.
We really enjoyed kind of moving it, we were doing the plates at first, and that seemed like a really obvious place to start as far as just kind of a simple surface to be able to decorate this, literally a canvas. It's, that's what a plate is. It's basically a big canvas. So it was fun to do that and then move into doing some of our regular forms that we do. I love this one. This is one of my favorites. I love that there.
That was the first one. Yeah.
But then to work in some of our quote unquote more normal forms that we typically do in our other work and see how that translated into this collaboration. I really enjoyed that idea. And it was really fun to be doing the mark making on some of Ron's pots that he threw.
Right.
And then we got a studio day together, which was really fun.
It was fun. Yeah. Yeah. I love this cup. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were so many of this last group that came, brought a lot of ideas together. So I feel like, hopefully we're going to do another group of work in the next month or so, and maybe have some pots in May of this collaborative work. That's kind of our tentative plan right now. Yeah. So no, we don't. Let's see. We don't have any copyrights right now, but we both have really good lawyers. So.
Yeah. You're right.
And Bonnie, you're asking if I gave Amy the plate. We would have to kind of work out the logistics on that, because our firing temperatures are different. Like if I made a plate out of my clay and gave it to Amy and then she decorated it, she would have to use materials that when she gave it back to me would work in my kiln. So we haven't gone in that reverse direction yet, but we've talked about it. And we've also talked about kind of meeting in the middle. Like I'm thinking about lowering my temperature, and that would give Amy a little wiggle room with bringing her temperature up, her materials up a little bit. So that could happen too, but that's kind of big.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that would involve just testing, anytime you switch clays or switch materials or switch firing temperatures, it just takes a lot of testing to figure out what's going to work out well.
And
sorry.
We've got somebody, I believe Suzanne has got her hand raised. If you want to come off mute and ask your question. Well,
or you can put it in.
We'll come back to that, I guess.
One thing I was going to say, I think part of what we accepted about this process is that it's not the most efficient, so
no.
I'm making the pots or Ron did or whatever. And then, so I'll bisque fire and then I have to get them to Ron somehow. Then he puts his marks on there, fires again, and then gets them back to me. And I end up glazing them and firing up, so it's like, it definitely, we've kind of let go of the whole fact of like, we're not necessarily trying to be efficient with this process. It's more about kind of enjoying the collaboration and getting sweet pots out of it, which has been really awesome. I've got a couple here to share. This is a little tea bowl that Ron threw and decorated. And that one's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then here's a plate that I have that we enjoy.
Yeah.
Using, which is great. I did want to share, well, we're kind of waiting for questions. Ron and I did, we can't help our teacher selves. We have to have a little demo. So I've got a slab here that would be like a base of a plate that I went ahead and printed. So I did this earlier today. And this is when I say to the clay, please be good to mama and work. So, but just to kind of show the whole idea of the layering process. So this is that kind of orangey slip here. I brushed it on with a stiff bristle brush. So this would kind of have a little bit of texture to it. And then this is one of the pieces. So
this is exciting, you guys.
It is exciting. So I'm peeling this away.
Right.
which is slightly awkward to do one-handed, holding it up. All right. So, and thinking about like which one goes first. I've got two more of these little flowers here. So I've got the two flowers I put down first, then I put this down, and then I put that other flower down last. And that's that whole thing of like having things overlapping in front of and behind. What Ron was talking about, you have to kind of think backwards a little bit. So the things that you want to show up in front have to go on first. So peeling this off. But I love that graphic mark that printed surface makes. But it also has, you know, the slip doesn't always stick exactly perfectly every time. So I like that it kind of has a little bit of a rustic look to it, but you also get those clean lines in between. Gotta find out where this edge is. There we go. One last little peel away for the reveal. I apologize, this is not coming off perfectly cleanly.
There you go.
There we go.
Wow.
So I have to say, like, literally every single time I do this, I'm like a little kid. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's like, I know what it's going to do, and I still can't help myself. That it's just so much fun to do. That's what it's all about, right? Like something that's, you know, continues to excite you. All right. So then I would let this set up a little bit, cut it into the plate shape, add a foot, treat the rim, and let that dry. And I would bisque fire it and then send it to Ron. So he would have all this lovely space to decorate this somehow. Right. I will try to salvage this and make this into a plate for us, Ron.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. And you should put the date on it, or a Zoom date. So I'm going to answer just one or two quick questions before I do my little demo. Let me see. So the black that I do on the collaborative work, it is not a slip transfer. It is also wax. So this doesn't have any Amy's work on it, but in the case of Amy sending me some work, I would have drawn the pencil and then waxed everything over top of all Amy's patterns in the background, and then show you what I'm getting ready to show you. So that was one question. But
Ron, that would still, it's already been bisque fired at that point, so you can still do that even on bisqueware?
Yeah, all the wax stuff happens on bisque.
Okay.
Yep. And so all that work that Amy and I are doing together, that's earthenware, and that's fired to 03, Amy?
I use High Water Stand Red is the that we're using for that.
And I'm just going to shift my camera around here, you guys, so bear with me for just a second. And
while you're doing that, Bonnie had a question. If you want to come off mute and ask your question, Bonnie. Why? It's a
I think I asked them all on the chat, but I just I'm really making a connection here, because I follow Ron and Amy. They're the only two people I follow on Instagram, and to see you two together is amazing. So
thank you.
I really am excited about the two things. The connection to Ron with printmaking. I never saw that black figure thing as printmaking or wood cutting.
Right.
And that really ties you into the whole Japanese aesthetic too.
Exactly. Yes.
And with Amy, I never knew that you were a seamstress.
Right.
That totally explains a whole lot. It really does. I'm a seamstress too, and it informed my whole life, you know, to be a seamstress. So I think that's what's so exciting about this program, and I really appreciate your giving it to us.
Cool. Thanks, Bonnie. Thank you. Okay. So now I'll do a little magic. So hopefully, usually I will do like a bunch of pencil drawings, most all the pots I'll pencil in, and then the next 3 or 4 days are waxing. And so, and I can wax maybe about max, it takes, 20, if I can do 20 pots a day, that's a lot. I kind of get fried after 20. And then the next day I'll come in and put the black. So this is the black stain, and I'll either use a commercial product. Well, I can't get to it right now, but I'll use a commercial Amico. Is it Amico or Amco, Amy?
Amico.
Thanks. There went my sponsorship. I'll either use that straight out of the jar and just thin it down a little, or I've also started using this homemade concoction that has some black iron oxide and some other stains in it. And I quite like this. This takes me back to sort of materials, and I'm kind of, at one time I was big into materials. So anyway, so here we go. So just I brush this on here, and it just,
Like magic, Ron.
You'll see how it changes. And sometimes I'm a little more intentional about leaving some of, you'll see after I blot it here, I'm a little more intentional about leaving these sort of marks that do look a little bit more like make it look like a wood cut. And then I'm just using these, I think this is like a makeup sponge, to blot away this excess.
So Ron, I understand that what the wax is doing, it's real easy to see the orange there. All the little marks, like the feather marks in the body.
Oh, yeah.
How did you create those marks?
Oh yeah, that's
also
a good question. That's also wax. So there's wax in the negative, and then all the little feather marks or all the little details, any detail is also wax. And I've got, I've got some different brushes that I use to make a different mark with. So once this is fired, I may clean that up. I'd spend another 30 seconds on that, probably cleaning it up a little better. And then once I get them all decorated and they go in the kiln, this again is the end result. So see, this would have had the wax all on these places and on the details. So
that's so satisfying, Ron.
Yeah,
like
it's
fun
cool.
and gratification.
Yeah. And then the other cool thing about it is that, I don't necessarily know. I mean, I sort of know what this is going to look like when it comes out of the soda kiln, but there's also a lot of variation in the kiln. And so I get this, this interesting kind of edge here that's kind of blasted by the soda, that's kind of silvery.
Mm-hmm.
See that real juicy, this really beautiful things happening. This is all from the soda in the kiln. So going back to Amy, the work that Amy and I were doing, or that we are doing, that would have sort of been the process. That would have been the process. I would have drawn these birds in pencil, put wax around all of them, and then put some wax around all this so I didn't get any black on it, and then just brush the black and then blot it. And then it goes back to Amy, and she has to fire it again to burn the wax off, and then glazes it. There's like 4 more steps after I get a hold of it. So anyway, so it's quite, like Amy said, it's quite a lot of steps and not really efficient as far as all that goes. But that's what really, I think, makes it unique and makes it,
Ron, can I ask another question?
Sure.
Are you going to share with us any backstory on your character, the owl abduction?
The owl abduction. Right. Right. That is not this one.
It's like the UFO beaming up the.
Yeah.
I love that. I gave that character on one of your jars to my son for Christmas, and I
Yeah.
love the idea
Yeah.
an alien is going to come down and take back a sample, but it's not going to be a human.
Right.
Of course,
Right.
it's
That's
gonna
so
be
cool.
an owl.
Well, it's all kind of this story that I'm telling myself, in my head, and a lot of it is coming at this point. A lot of it is coming in pieces, right? So, the owl, just the owl, came about from some really old Japanese prints that I was looking at that were really kind of quirky. And so I just started doing my thing with this owl. The UFO piece comes basically from my extraterrestrial encounters as a child, and and my love of the X-Files, and also my love of Keith Haring and his work. So a lot of that is kind of blending, so it's all kind of, there's a big broad story in my head around it all. And but I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be like something, if I was writing a book, that it would carry over into the next book or even the next piece. They can all be kind of individual. And then with the work with Amy, it even goes even deeper or into another place, like with those pots with the octopus or the fish or the robot. That robot one, it was kind of like I was kind of thinking, he's on this other planet, he's investigating this flower or whatever, this kind of thing that Amy's drawing. So it's really fun for me. And then I give it, then somebody else gets it and they don't know any of that necessarily, right? And so then, like the person with the pterodactyl, she associated that with this club that she went to in her college years, and that was just so cool to me that happened. So anyway, but that is a little helpful maybe.
That is, I didn't expect you to reveal the entire Ron Philbeck.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't even know that, and I have to pay somebody a lot of money to when I sit down with her and do all that. So I'm working on it.
We've hit most of the questions. There are just a few. Ron, does it take more than one coat of stain, or
No.
one coat does it?
No, that does it. Yeah.
And Amy, I think I know the answer. Your cups are microwavable.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
I would say one thing, just to kind of piggyback off what Ron was saying about like kind of telling a story and these characters on there. My favorite part of the process is when I get the pots back from Ron, because it's so delightful. I don't know, like we'll kind of send pictures to each other here and there, like, oh, I was excited about this one or whatever. But for the most part, I have no idea what he's put on these pots. So we kind of got into this habit that, like my boys and my husband were all really into this project. And so it was this fun reveal. We would all kind of get together and I'd unload them in my studio and look through each of them. And it was just like this fun discovery each time,
Cool.
so I was like, delight does not do justice, like it was so much fun to just kind of see what he did with each of the pieces. So
cool.
Really enjoyed this project we've done together.
Yeah. Me
So
too.
clearly this collaborative effort has been one aspect of working in pandemic. Touch real briefly on the other aspect of the pandemic, selling your work, and how is that, just speak a little bit about the challenges and how you've kind of overcome those. I think people are pretty interested in hearing how that's gone.
Why don't you go first, Ron?
Okay. Well, fortunately for me, I was in a pretty good place when everything shut down. As a matter of fact, I had just done a talk at the North Carolina Pottery Conference last March about how to start selling your work online. So I had just given a presentation on that to a number of potters, and so I was very fortunate to have a good social media presence, a good mailing list, and an online shop that was already set up and could be stocked. And I knew my way around shipping, and I knew my way around putting the work out there. So truthfully, this year has been one of my, 2020 was my best year ever as a potter, as far as selling work. Selling online opened up a whole world of interested pottery collectors. I wasn't restricted to just going to do regional craft shows or whatever, So I feel like all the work that I've done, since I came online in 2005 has kind of organically grown up to this point. And I've always been interested in technology and the internet and online marketing and stuff like that, but in telling my story, I blogged for many, many years. So I'm real comfortable, too comfortable sometimes putting stuff out there. But it really did benefit me, in this pandemic to be in that place, because everything shut down. All our shows got canceled, the Mint got canceled, everything got canceled. And so it's been but it has, going and doing those shows is wonderful, because we get to see people and we get to interact with people, and people get to interact with our pots and pick them up. And, I think the customer or the collector or just the everyday casual pottery lover, is getting a feel for buying pots online, and I am too. I mean, I buy pots online too, but anyway, but I do miss, I don't miss packing up my truck and getting up at 5 a.m. and going and setting up for a show. But there's still a lot of work that goes into selling online, because there's a lot of shipping and packing. And that has I've got a pretty good sized little showroom right here attached to my studio, and not half, but about a third of that now is dedicated to shipping. Yeah. Instead of people coming in here and looking at pots. What about you, Amy?
Anything to add?
Well, I was just going to say, for me personally, like I had an Etsy site set up, but I really only had ever done, I think, 1, maybe 2 sales before. So it was a bit of a shift for me. Like many people, I had 2020 was to be a banner year for me as far as teaching workshops. I have a symposium that called Red Handed, that's kind of dedicated to low fire clay that I had started with Liz Lott Summerfield and Ron Peterson. We were supposed to have that. I was supposed to be teaching at several different conferences and filming a video and all, so it was kind of a pretty big year for me. And that obviously changed. And, you just kind of roll with the punches and know that things are going to get deferred and some things just won't happen, and that's okay. So I was pleasantly surprised by how well just the customer base shifted to just being okay with purchasing online. I know a lot of potters have said that, we feel really supported well by people purchasing online. So I've done several Etsy sales, and that's worked out great. Ron and I run our sites a little differently. I think he keeps his open all the time. I treat mine more like a pop-up shop type thing, where I'll open it for maybe a weekend or a few days and then just close it down again. I found that works best for me, just because typically I don't have that much inventory. A lot of times I'm making work and it goes out almost immediately. So I found that that's the best way to work for me. I've done a few virtual workshops, which has been kind of fun. I'd like to do more. I had this weird hesitancy for it. We recently got our internet provider changed. We have better service. I think I was really worried for some time that I was going to be teaching and the internet would cut out. So I feel a little more confident with that. but you know, it actually has been nice, like as much as challenging as the pandemic's been, it's been a time too for like, we've just done a lot of stuff outside with our family and kind of focusing on kind of just reconnecting with being active outside has been pretty wonderful too, which is a little aside of, of Clay. But I've actually found that the online sale thing has actually worked out pretty well. And I actually enjoy kind of some of the conversations that are happening as a result of that too. So.
We did have a question there. Do your larger work suffer from the smaller Etsy-like inventory? I have heard that from some other potters, that large work is hard in a online environment. Is that a problem for you?
Well, I mean, honestly, for me, the first sale I did online, I had some larger pieces that I sold, and they're just really difficult to ship. I think a higher price point sometimes are a little bit harder to sell. And so I've kind of I shifted to making things that are a little bit easier to pack and ship. So I feel like when we get back to doing some in-person stuff, I'll get back to doing some of the larger work. But I learned kind of early on, for me personally, sanity wise, I found that just I'm gravitating toward making certain kind of work because it's a little bit easier to ship.
Yeah. I'm trying to put more medium to large size work on my Etsy site. And I have sold some bigger bowls and some bigger jars. And basically kind of what it came down to me was just being prepared as far as having the packing materials necessary to ship those things. Because I've got a setup where I can photograph them and all that. And so basically, and I'm just, figuring out how to pack and ship. So that has been a big part of my learning this in 2020 was getting all that material together.
And I think in your advantage, Ron, like having a history of selling so much online, you have a really good following for it. So I don't know who bought those larger pieces, but I would imagine like you've got some collectors that are familiar with your work.
That's right.
You feel confident investing in a larger piece because they know the quality of your work, and it's easier for them to imagine like, okay, this in a larger scale is going to be like, so.
I think you're exactly right. I think I haven't sold a lot of those pots, but the few that I have, I'm pretty sure are folks that have bought my work in person before. So yeah, that's a good point.
So we're sort of running over time, and I think everybody's enjoying it. And I think we're certainly welcome to keep going, but just in recognition that some people might have to drop off. How can people find you? I just put in the chat links to your main websites, but is that the best way, or do you want to point to a different way?
Yes, that's fine. I'm most active on Instagram as far as updating images and stuff like that. So my Instagram handle is just Amy Sanders Pottery. And my Etsy shop is the same. It's Etsy Amy Sanders Pottery. So.
Yeah.
And Ron?
Yeah, so I'll just show you this little card. Oh wait, I got a new one. I love these little cards. So there's all my socials. Is it backwards?
Nope, it looks backwards to you, but not to everybody else.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, Instagram, Ron Philbeck, and like the link that Vince put up to my website, ronphilbeckpottery.com, has links to everything. And I'm most active on Instagram and a little bit on Facebook. And then you can go through my website. If you wanted to be added to the mailing list, my email list, you can go to the contact page there and send me your email and I'll add you to my mailing list.
And as we mentioned early on, hopefully come September 25th, you can see both Ron and Amy at Potter's Market at the Mint. We are cautiously optimistic that we will be able to have the show this year, although certainly there are a lot of uncertainties about exactly what it will look like, but we're all counting on vaccines doing their job and getting that rolled out, and that we can all gather in person and be able to touch and hold some of these pots and interact with the potters directly. So if you need details about that event, pottersmarketatthemint.com, just run all of that to Potter's Market at the Mint, runtogether.com. We've got links about all the participating artists, information about Delhome, everything else. And so again, I'm happy if people want to stay on and pepper pepper these guys with additional questions. But
Sure.
in recognition of everyone's time, I think we'll thank them for their presentation. I'm going to stop the recording and kind of go offline if people want to stick around for additional questions. And again, we'll hopefully have the recording up maybe tonight, certainly tomorrow morning on YouTube, if you want to go back and watch it or point your friends in that direction. And finally, join us in 2 weeks, roughly March 15th, for a great talk from Steve Compton. So thanks for everybody for being here.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you
Appreciate your
all.
time.